You're welcome.
And commissioners, we were kind of last minute adjustment to the agenda. Bradley was hoping he could start the night off with his election update. It's just going to be a pretty short update, and he was hoping he could start the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, just thank you everyone for carving out some time on your Wednesday evening to attend what has become our monthly all community council meetings. And I hope these have been useful in the past, and it's been a great mechanism to get the word out of not only what is going on in the midst of COVID-19, but all of the other good and important things going on across Missoula County. So without further ado, Bradley, our elections administrator, do you want to share with us?
Yeah, thank you guys. As many of you know, I'm always happy to share information about the upcoming elections. And so I thought this would be an excellent opportunity because we're about to have some ballots go out for the Lolo School District election. On September 22nd, Lolo is going to have a school district election. And so, Kevin, there's going to be a lot of people out in your community there who get that ballot and wonder, where is my general election ballot? So we really wanted to start. We've updated our messaging both online, and we're working hard on making sure that we are sharing our message. So when you call into the elections office, it'll let voters know that ballots are mailing out on the 2nd of September for those who live in Lolo School District, and our ballots for the general election will be mailed out on October 9th. So a little bit of update about the general election as well. We have a little bit of overlap there, so it always causes a bit of confusion when ballots are out for one election and everybody is excited for the upcoming November. The commissioners passed a resolution for this upcoming November election, and we will be an all-mail election like we did our primary election. So we will be issuing a ballot to everybody who is active on October 9th. And that's important because if you're an inactive voter, meaning that you've missed a few mailings or had an undeliverable mail ballot, you're not automatically going to get a ballot in the mail. So we're really encouraging people to check online at myvoterpagemt.com. And I'll put that in the chat for you guys, because that's going to be the biggest tool for people in your community. They can check to see that they're registered to vote. They can check to see that they're getting their ballot to the correct address. And once they've voted their ballot, they can track it to make sure that it's been accepted by our office. So we had an incredibly successful primary election with record-setting turnout, 10 percentage points higher than the previous elections. We're really hoping and pushing for this in November. We are upping our services, and we're really working hard to meet voters where they're at while encouraging additional participation. What this is going to look like is it'll be a very similar mail ballot election, but we'll be doing satellite events. I'm still finalizing them for Frenchtown and for Seeley Lake, but in the weeks leading up to the election, we're going to come out there. We're going to be able to register voters, issue them a ballot, and make sure it gets counted then. We'll be doing one the week before the election at the University of Montana. Any voter anywhere is welcome to come to these, get a ballot, get a replaced ballot, or register and vote at that point in time. So as we get a little bit closer, we'll be sharing out that information with everybody here. The other area that we're doing is we are increasing our hours. We have had a lot of discussion about USPS and mail ballot elections and making sure that ballots get in. I work closely with our local postmaster, and they recommend 7 days before the election. So starting 8 days before the election and that Saturday before, we're going to make sure that we have extended hours to help voters, and we're going to have drive-through drop-off locations at the election center for the Saturdays before the election. Now on election day, we've doubled our drop-off locations. So we've got a lot more communities covered, including Seeley Lake, Frenchtown. We've got them out in Lolo throughout the community here. They will all be ballot drop-off locations. The only area that a voter will be able to get a new ballot or a replacement ballot will be at the election center. So we really wanted to work with a lot of these groups, particularly Kevin, making sure you were aware that those ballots are coming out on September 2nd, and that the ballots for the November election will be following shortly behind. because I expect that to be the #1 question. Where is the president on this ballot? And it's coming forward. We'll have them available. The other big question we've received is, can I vote in person? And yes, this is an all-mail election with that option to vote in person, and that actually starts on October 2nd. So you'll be able to come to the election center at 140 North Russell and get a ballot starting on October 2nd. And on the back side of the instructions, we put together a calendar of all of the extended times, the regular times, our holidays, to help really make sure that it's clear for voters for this election. We just really wanted to make sure that we could help cover some of the confusion with the Lolo school election being so close. We worked really closely with Robbie, the school clerk out there at Lolo, and a few others to help with our messaging. And then we really wanted to make sure that you guys got this information before we get our ballots mailed out, that we're going to have drop-off locations on election day, in-person voting at the election center, and really, really increase our services. We are hoping for record-setting turnout for this November's election as well. And that's going to mean that we get a lot of participation. And if you guys have any ideas, don't hesitate to reach out to us at the elections office. Bert has his hand up, so we'll make sure we catch him there. But also Bert had invited us to reach out to a small group. I'm always willing to join groups like yours, join small groups, help share this information in any way that we can. And we're partnering and meeting regularly with Sarah and our communications team to help make sure we've got a really robust outreach on this. Bert, can I grab you really quick here, sir?
Yeah, I was thinking if you would put a lot of this information, and it might be a little difficult to get it all in a flyer, but to put it in a flyer, email it to all of the 7 councils and let us distribute it to the community members in our community. That might be a pretty good thing. For example, I've got Tim O'Leary here in Bonner that will post stuff for us on the Bonner tap room door. So with all of the questions that were asked in the Ravalli County Commissioners meeting a couple of days ago, there seems to be a lot of confusion about where you can drop off mail, where the drop-offs are. By the way, I didn't hear Bonner mentioned in a Dropbox area, but at any rate, I think it's all good. I'm sorry, what?
Bradley was on mute.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working on a flyer right now. We're going to get that going together because that's one of the great ways that we're not catching people. That's something that we really identified that we were missing. We're good about social media. We're good about printed instructions. We're good about interviews, but really like handbills, flyers, those aspects. And we met and discussed that today. I'll make sure we get those out as soon as they're finalized and ready to go. And they'll be a little bit ahead of the time before voters get their ballot. So we can help answer these questions now when they're coming forward and they're being presented, because this is where voters are having the questions, not on October 10th when they get their ballots.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I kind of hate to say it out loud, but there are a lot of people that are easily confused. And so the more clear, short, concise information you can get to them, the more likely we are going to have a good election. The other thing is, you didn't mention the fact that mail-in election saves money for the county, saves money for the taxpayers.
Yeah, what we see is it is a lower cost election. And what we saw with the primary election was so much turnout that our costs were lower, not by a considerable amount, but our cost per voted ballot was almost $3 lower than previous elections. And that is an enormous savings. The more turnout we have, the more effective we are in utilizing tax dollars. We prepare an election for 85,000 people. And if 85,000 show up, it's a much more effective election than if 40,000 show up. It costs more to run that same election. And I think I saw Tom in there too. Tom, can I grab you really quick, sir?
Oh, you sure can, Bradley. First, I really like whenever I hear Seeley Lake on any of these things because we're kind of an outlier. Could you just, the event that you'll do up here, like the one in Frenchtown, what exactly is that? Could you just go through the specifics again so I can make sure I publicize it right up here?
You bet. So right now we're finalizing our location. What this will be is we get this out is we're shooting for Sealy Lake on the 20th of October. Right now we're coordinating with that tax extension office in the little mall there. And this is essentially an opportunity for somebody to receive the same services there that they would receive if they drove into Missoula to the election center. We can register you to vote. We can get you a replacement ballot. We can cast your ballot there. We'll also have ADA voting equipment on site to help make sure that anybody who needs to utilize that's ready. And so it is essentially a way for us to go out and meet community members where they're at, to help provide those services, to make sure that you don't have to drive into Missoula County. If you haven't gotten your ballot yet, we'll come out to you to help make sure you get the best service you can. Now we're nailing down all of the very final specifics. We're shooting for a 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Frenchtown and at Sealy Lake. And as soon as we've gotten our final confirmation, we'll make sure that we're putting that out, especially towards the community councils, because you guys are so great to help and spread that message. We're also planning up there on working directly with Nathan and the Pathfinder to help make sure that it's really clear when we'll be there, how we'll be up there. And we'll likely do a mailing out to voters that says, come and visit us at this location, because the more we can advertise it, the better services voters will get.
Oh, that's great. So basically whatever you could do in Russell Street for that block of time, you'll be able to do up here. It's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Ridley.
Can you say again the hours of the election center here in Missoula?
Yes, normally we're 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the 24th and then the week before the election. So the 24th, we're going to be doing extended hours from 9 to 1, as well as the 31st of October. And then we will be running 8 a.m. to 6:30 for the week before the election. Now, it's always confusing to voters. The day before the election, we have to close to issuing brand new ballots to voters at noon. And then this will all come out in that one pager so that you've got all of this information, including a schedule of those hours, our drop locations, as well as a satellite office location and hours, and then more information in specific about mail ballot voting, making sure you're successful, tracking your ballot, and feeling confident in the process.
And I have another question. You said that in-person voting begins October 2nd. Is that correct?
Yes, in-person voting is only at the election center and it begins October 2nd.
And that would then predate me. If I were to do that, I do not get a mailed ballot. That stops the mailing.
So what will happen is we'll have to void that mail ballot. And we're going to be working a lot on outreach about this, because that's been a big area of confusion is, well, will voters end up with two ballots? How do we help make sure there's no fraud? Using the Secretary of State's database, in order to issue that ballot on the 2nd, we must void that ballot. That will already be processing at the post office, but it will not be a valid ballot. If it gets voted by anybody, it cannot be accepted by the system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Hey, Bradley, this is Josh. I just wanted to jump in for a second, let people know I'm here. I've been on for a little bit, but I was quiet while you were. Sorry, I had to jump on late, but you did a great job, and I'll go back to being quiet. Just wanted to make sure people knew I was here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from anybody out here?
I have one.
I missed who said that, but.
Tom Tucker.
Oh, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, so 30 years ago when I went in and signed up at the election center, now when I sign my ballot, I don't remember how I signed it 30 years ago. So, and now I'm old, so I shake. So do I have to come in and re-sign my voter's registration card so that the gals that work in the center there don't throw my ballot in the garbage because they don't recognize my signature?
So I'm really glad you asked that question. We keep a record of all of the different signatures from if you've ever filled out another voter registration from moving or filled out an absentee ballot application. And then for this election, because we have so many polling place voters who are regular polling place voters, to help eliminate that exact situation, we're going to be doing a mailing at the beginning of this next month. And it's going to say information like, make sure that you have your mailing address and residential address updated. You can use this form just to get an updated signature on your profile to make sure your ballot is counted for that election, as well as a lot of those important dates that I rattled off to you guys right away when we got started, when ballots mail, when they need to be returned. And I was just clearing those mailers with our communications department earlier today. So we're expecting to be having those hit the mailboxes next week.
Okay, I'll look forward to it.
Perfect, yeah.
Hi, this is Ann with the county. I would also just wanted to add that we would never just throw away your ballot. We would contact you, just so you know.
Yeah,
well, see, I don't know that. I was told that if my signature didn't look like it did 30 years ago, that they garbaged it. So
no, we'll reach out to you, and you actually get a little extended time to correct that. And that's a big issue that we'll be making sure that we hit. We're going to do a little video about mail ballot voting and tips for success. But the sooner you send your ballot in, if you forgot to sign or if your signature doesn't match what's on file, the more time we have to reach out directly to you to help correct that. So we're going to be working closely with voters to make sure that all of this gets aware. And I love these meetings because I'm taking notes throughout this to make sure that we don't miss any of these great questions.
Well, Bradley, I appreciate that because, 30 years is a long time. And for me, there's probably a lot more of us senior citizens out here all over the county that have probably got the same problem. So I'm glad that you're going to help try and correct that.
Yeah, we just want to stay ahead of it wherever we can to make sure that voters are as successful as they can be without any extra steps on their behalf.
All right, thank you.
Well, I could go on about elections for another hour, hour and a half, but I think, at this point,
no, thank you.
If there's no other questions for me specifically, I'll let you guys continue forward because I saw you had a pretty robust agenda.
Thanks, Bradley.
And thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, so next is Cindy Farr with her health update for us. Thanks, Cindy, for adjusting with the agenda tonight.
Oh yeah, no problem. So just to let everybody know that if you weren't on earlier, I'm leaving my camera off because I have not great Wi-Fi. And so I've discovered that when I don't have great Wi-Fi, if I leave the camera off, I'm less likely to get kicked off of the meeting. So I hope y'all can hear me okay. So current update as of today in Missoula County, we've had 417 cumulative positive cases of COVID-19. We've got 7 new cases since yesterday morning. Right now we have 47 active cases. We've had 367 recoveries and 3 deaths. We've got over 270 close contacts that are being monitored at this time. We have 3 Missoula residents that are hospitalized in 3 Missoula County residents that are hospitalized in Missoula County and 2 non-county residents hospitalized in Missoula County. Overall, the spread of COVID-19 disease over the last month has become very stable. So we're typically seeing anywhere from, 1 or 2 cases a day up to 11 or 12, but most of the time it's falling in between there at around 7 or 8 new cases a day. Our reproductive value, or the R value, which tells us for every 1 person who gets infected with COVID-19, how many people become infected from that 1 person. And currently our R value is below 1. So that means less than 1 person gets infected from each person who has the disease. So that's really good. That's what we want to see whenever we're trying to control an outbreak of disease, is we want that R value to stay below 1. When we start seeing it get up above 1, and particularly whenever it gets above around 1.2 or 1.3, then that means that it's becoming much harder to control in our community. So we have been working very closely with all of the superintendents of all of the county schools in helping giving them guidance for reopening the schools and having the children coming back, and all of the different preventative measures that they could take in order to make sure that they're doing everything that they can to safely have their students come back. Each school has a little bit different plan, but for the most part, they're all following the same guidelines as far as trying to implement social distancing as often as possible, having certain grades use different doors to access buildings whenever that's possible, making sure that they're building in extra hand washing time in between classes, and when they're coming back from recess or when they're going to lunch. They've got a much more structured way of getting kids on and off the bus. Most of them have assigned seating on the buses. So that way, if we were to get a case in a school or in a bus, we would easily be able to identify who would be contacts to those kiddos. So most of the schools started today, and some I believe are starting next week, but for the most part, all of the county schools, public schools and private schools are going to be starting within the next week. And so we're going to be keeping a really close eye on that situation. Across the nation, we're starting to see more cases in children. That's actually risen quite a lot in the last few weeks. And so we'll be keeping a very close eye on what's going to happen with that in our community. As many of you know, the University of Montana had students move back in just about 2 weeks ago, and classes resumed last week. And so again, we're keeping a very close eye on that situation. We have not seen an increase in cases due to the return of university students, but we've also not been through one full incubation period yet. And so while we don't report it out publicly how many cases we have that are associated with any given place or university, or business, or anything like that, we are keeping an eye on it internally, just so that we can see how it's impacting our overall community as far as COVID goes. We've got some pretty exciting things happening with our testing facility out on Flynn Lane. It's taken longer for us to get it going than we were initially hoping for, but we are hopefully going to start doing rapid testing out at that facility starting. I've got my fingers crossed for next Tuesday. We're just waiting for some filters to get installed into our lab hood that we had put out there to protect our staff from who are actually running those tests all day, every day. And so once we got the hood put in, and once we get the filter installed, and then we are getting it certified, hopefully that'll all happen on Monday, and then we should be able to start doing some rapid testing for symptomatic individuals starting Tuesday. And then additionally, in September, we are going to be getting a second rapid testing machine, so we'll be able to double our capacity for doing those rapids. So that's pretty exciting news. We are also working very closely with the wildland firefighters. As I'm sure many of you know, we're starting to see wildfires pop up all across Montana, and so we are working closely with those crews, so that if they identify someone who is a positive COVID case, that they've got plans in place, or anyone who needs testing, that they've got plans in place. They've got a pretty robust plan for social distancing, and they're not doing like the fire camp kitchens like they used to. Basically, everybody is put onto smaller crews, and those crews don't interact with the other crews, and then they have to do a drive-through at the beginning of the day to get 3 meals a day for everyone that's on their crew. And so so they're doing a lot of things to limit the spread of COVID in those fire camps. And again, that's another area that we're just watching really closely to try to make sure that we're not increasing our caseload with all of those people that are coming in from all over the country to fight our wildfires. So that's about all I have as far as an update. Currently, we're seeing about half of the cases have been identified because they've been a close contact to a case. And then about between 26 and 44% of our cases, depending on the day, are from community spread. Of our active cases are from community spread. Again, we keep a close eye on that number because if we start seeing more cases that are community spread and less that are a contact to a case, then we know that, we're starting to see more disease in our community. So with that, I guess I will open it up to questions.
Okay, this is Bert. I had a couple of questions. Friends of mine in the university district have told me that there have been a few parties going on in the area, and kids are not wearing masks or anything. Are you aware of that, or has anybody told you about it?
Yes, we are aware, and I've actually taken that to our enforcement team to see what we can do about it. The problem is that if it's at a private residence, then they can have up to 50 people without social distancing under the governor's orders and the local orders. While it is not encouraged, we can't make them have less than that. And so definitely there's been some outreach from the university as well as our enforcement team whenever we find out that it's associated with a fraternity or a sorority. And that's been actually pretty well under control. It's those private parties that make it a lot harder for us to be able to enforce.
Right, thank you. And the other one was, I've noticed, or at least I think I've noticed, that there's been a decrease, a continuing decrease in the number of active cases, at least on the news at night. Is that a trend is it long enough trend that you can make any thoughts on it, or is it just a point in time?
Yeah, so I think that it could be either one. I feel like we need to watch it for another week or two to see if we continue to see that decrease in cases, in active cases, in order to be able to tell if it's an actual trend. But we have been seeing it for about 2 weeks now. We've been seeing it start to go down. And so if we continue to see it go down, then we can say, yes, this is definitely a trend and that it's not due to people not wanting to get tested. And so that's where the conundrum is are we seeing fewer cases and fewer active cases because we had that time period where it was taking 2 or 3 weeks for test results to come back. And that hasn't been the case since July 23rd, but it's been really hard to get the public to understand that that's not the case, that it really was only about a 3-week period in July that was happening. And now we're getting them back in 24 to 48 hours. But because of that lag time, we have been told anecdotally from people, oh, I don't want to get tested because it doesn't do you any good anyway. It takes weeks to get results back. And so we're still trying to push that message that, you can get your test results in 24 to 48 hours. If you're having symptoms, you should get tested. So that's what we're not sure about is, are we seeing fewer active cases because less people are getting tested? Or are we seeing fewer active cases because there really is a decrease in the COVID disease in our community?
Thanks. Last thing I want to say is I moved here 9 years ago. I've been really, really happy with the move. I've been pleased to be here, and with the local health department and the local government, all total, I'm still happy to be here. So thank you for your part in it, Cindy.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Cindy, this is Kevin and Lolo. Hey, just a quick question for you with the return to the school and high school sports, fall sports. Let's talk about football, for example. What's the contingency plan if there's an outbreak? Are the teams going to suspend the sport or what's the plan for that type of thing?
Yeah, so it kind of depends. I know that we're going to have some very specific guidance related to fall sports coming out in the next day or two from Ellen. But we have talked with the schools and we've talked with the different coaches and stuff about what's the protocol if we were to get a case. So let's say you've got the example I'll use is football because you brought that one up. So let's say that we've got, 2 football teams that played each other. and they were all on the field, and everybody that played, one of them developed COVID. Then we would have to really work with the coaches to determine who would be considered close contacts to those kids that that developed the disease. And then those close contacts would need to get quarantined. Currently, I don't see how it's possible to not quarantine the entire team if you have one kid who develops COVID. And so then it's going to depend on, are you just out for the 2 weeks or are you out for the whole season? Because once you identify one person who has it and they have, 40 close contacts, then the likelihood that we're going to identify another one or two that have it is pretty high. And so then we have to identify the contacts to those additional one or two, and it could take the entire team out for the whole season. So it just kind of depends on the situation.
And then with that, with the close contacts, like the on-field crew, like game officials, chain crew, things like that, I would imagine they would be also part of that close contact situation.
Yeah, we would have to do a lot of very in-depth interviewing, but and I am not an expert on football. I don't really watch football, so I would have to really do some pretty clear investigating to determine who was within 6 feet for a cumulative 15 minutes or more. But that is part of why the guidelines are coming out, that we're trying to figure out what can be done so that the kids can still play football, but we limit the number of close contacts if we were to identify a case. So we're still working through some of those, but it should be coming out in the next day or two.
Awesome. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question for close contact, whether it be classroom or sports. It seems that after a contact, the other people that were in close contact self-isolate, right?
Yeah, they're told that they have to. If they're identified as a close contact, then they have to quarantine for 14 days. And then what happens is the health department staff call and check on them every day, or they can use our app. We have a mobile app that you can put on your phone that basically does a push notification a couple of times a day that says, hey, take your temperature. Are you having any of these symptoms? And then, it flags our staff if they say yes to any of those symptoms, or if their temperature is over 100.4. And then if that happens, or if you choose not to do the app and you're getting a phone call every day, and if you develop symptoms, then the nurses call and facilitate getting you in for testing. And we actually are currently testing all close contacts anyway, as long as it's been at least 3 days past your most recent exposure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, it looks like you have your hand up. Tom Broder.
I do have my hand up. It's, Cindy, probably the same question I ask every time, but we still up here in Sealy have a very robust tourist season going on. Do we have data on out of state versus in state, number one? And then number two, if someone seems to be symptomatic, even though they're not Missoula County residents, but if they're symptomatic, can they do the rapid testing when it opens?
So currently our testing facility is limited to Missoula County residents only. So those folks that are visiting that develop symptoms would need to go to one of our other clinics to get tested. Like I know that they can get tested at Cost Care, they can get tested at Grant Creek. I believe Now Care is now doing testing. So we have the Frenchtown Family Practice is doing testing. So there's a variety of other clinics that can test those folks, because we are trying to conserve our local resources for our local residents. I do not have any specific numbers as far as how many cases we have had in out of state or even out of county travelers that have come to Missoula. I know that we've had a few, just because I look at our line list on occasion just to see what we're seeing. And I can tell you that I don't think that I've seen more than a handful, maybe 5 people that we get reported to us and then find out that they actually live somewhere else since the beginning of this pandemic.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Cindy, Devin Jackson, Lolo Community Council. I just had a quick, I mean, obviously our numbers are dropping and it looks good for the most part, but it sounds like what we're discussing here is a large increase in close contact numbers. Right now, your close contact numbers are pretty small, and as of today, with the schools open and then a whole team, we're talking about much larger numbers. Since we're not testing as much right now, do we have the testing capacity to handle the fact that we're talking about larger close contacts to test?
Yes, so we definitely have the capacity to do all of the contact tracing and monitoring for close contacts, as well as getting them in for testing. Currently, we've only had about between 40 and 60 people a day getting tested at our facility, and we have the capacity to double that if we need to. So we definitely have the capacity to increase, and we'll actually have even better capacity for that increased testing once we are able to get that second Abbott rapid testing machine. And we're hoping that will come in. It's on order, but they were back ordered, and so we're hoping that that will be in by the middle of September.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Other questions out there?
I don't see anyone else's hands up.
I am unable to see where you raise your hand, so I've been interrupting. This is Lisa. Can someone tell me where is that thing to raise your hand so I can be polite?
It's in there's a bar. If you just run your cursor over the middle of the screen, there's a gray toolbar that comes up, and then there's a hand in the middle of that bar.
My bar does not have a hand. I was looking on that bar. So I guess I can't participate.
I think there's certain versions of Teams that include the ability to raise your hand and certain versions that don't. So you probably have the version that doesn't have it on it.
All right, I will continue to interrupt and try to be polite. Sorry.
Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions, I'll let you guys get on with the rest of your meeting, and I'll be interested to see what happens over the next month or so as school comes in. And just remember that you can always check our website and get updated information. And I do still do the COVID briefings, usually at least 3 days a week, sometimes 4. So that's also another way that you can get that updated information and kind of get a handle on whatever is the current topic.
Thanks so much, Cindy. Really appreciate you attending these all community council meetings.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks. Lisa, Mrs. Burt, you might want to look at upgrading your team's software. Just go in see if it needs an update.
Into settings?
I've never done it, so I don't know, but I know updates usually change the way it works.
It might
Okay.
be something you want to do when you're not attending a live meeting. Might be a computer restart or a reboot.
Okay, because I just click on the, click here to join the meeting. So that's all I do. But I'll check it out at another time.
All right. Next we have Sydney Kennedy, who's going to give us an update on the Brownsfield project.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Kennedy with the in CABS with the Grants Division. I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to share. I'll try to do that now. Hopefully you can see it. Are you folks seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Over the last couple of years, myself and Willie Wilzenbach from Newfields, who's on the call, and Karen Hughes also, we attended your council meetings and talked about brownfields. And when we first started our conversation with you all, we were in the process of applying for a brownfields grant from the EPA, and we have since received an assessment grant. It's almost been a year since we received the award. It was $300,000 that we could apply towards brownfields assessments. And I just wanted to revisit with all of you and let you know that we do have this grant. We are still looking for sites. We have funding available to support assessments of brownfields, and I just wanted to share with you all once more what exactly this grant does for the community. And just, I gotta hide some of all these things that are blocking my screen. Give me just a second, there we go. Okay, so a brownfield site is defined as real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of hazardous substances, pollutants, contaminants, controlled substances, petroleum or petroleum products, or is mine scarred land. So brownfields can adversely impact human health, decrease the value of surrounding properties, deter potential investments, and represent significant safety hazards to the community if left unaddressed. So some of the characteristics of a brownfield site might include abandoned property, active but underutilized property, real estate turnover complicated by real or perceived contamination, a blighted property significantly might conflict with a master plan or a revitalization plan. Brownfield sites can be residential, commercial, or industrial parcels of land. Some examples are dry cleaners, automotive repair shops, service stations, industrial manufacturers, illegal dump sites, railroad facilities, warehouses, landfills, and properties that may have been used to produce methamphetamine. Some of the common contaminants associated with brownfields includes lead-based paint, asbestos, industrial chemicals, petroleum, or controlled substances. So some of the benefits of a brownfields redevelopment, brownfields assessment grants can help us promote revitalization or redevelopment of underutilized properties. So these grants can help return properties exhibiting signs of potential contamination back to a productive reuse. In this screen, there's an image of Silver Park. Silver Park was a brownfield site, and that was represents a public and private partnership on a former sawmill. So some of the benefits of brownfields redevelopment is job growth, reduced development pressure on agricultural land or urban sprawl, protection of human health and the environment, stimulating additional redevelopment activities. And I can't see what's behind that part because I'm seeing, oh, did I just lose it? I didn't. Well, I did on my end. Where did it go? Sorry about that. There we go. Can you see it still?
I'm not seeing it.
Okay. Sorry about that. Part of the little menu bars show up and I can't see the screen anymore.
It's up now.
Yeah, and I just started from the beginning. My bad. Hold on, I'll get back. Okay, so it can eliminate eyesores, and I'm sorry, I can't see my screen. So I apologize for that. Identifying an eligible brownfield site, there's some elements that need to exist, that need to be present. Real property, abandoned or underutilized property, a potential for contamination. There needs to be potential reuse or redevelopment, and there needs to be willing stakeholders. So this screen's going to be really hard to see, but this is kind of the anatomy of a brownfield site and the process that occurs once we determine that there's a site that's eligible and is potentially contaminated. We would do a phase 1 environmental assessment, and if that assessment suggests that there may be contamination on the property that rises to the level of concern, then we would do a phase 2 environmental assessment, and that's where we would actually collect some samples and do some testing. And then if that demonstrates that cleanup is needed, we could use these funds for cleanup planning. We can use these funds for redevelopment planning. We just can't use them for the costs of cleanup. So here's another example of what the grants are used for. So we start with developing inventories of brownfields. We've been doing that for the past year plus. Then we start prioritizing sites. We involve the community, which we continue to try to do. And then we conduct phase 1 and phase 2 site assessments. We develop cleanup and reuse plans. And like I said, we cannot use the funds for the cost of cleanup. So a phase 1 assessment could involve an evaluation of environmental conditions at the site, historical analysis, which is reviewing historical maps of the property and nearby properties, visiting the site, interviewing individuals familiar with the site, current and past owners, for example, or local officials, conducting environmental record searches, and the final product would be a report, a final report. And if there are environmental concerns, then a phase 2 assessment would be conducted. So a phase 2 assessment would include collecting environmental samples, surveying for asbestos and lead-based paint, inventorying hazardous materials, perhaps conducting geophysical investigations or exploratory excavation to locate buried features or tanks, and determine if there are contaminants that warrant cleanup. And then we could engage in cleanup planning, and cleanup planning could either be proactive and unsolicited, or it could be requested by an agency. The cleanup planning could involve designs and permit applications, cost estimates, and redevelopment planning or visioning. And some of the benefits of conducting brownfields assessments is, first of all, the participation is voluntary. This is not an enforcement program. It's entirely voluntary. Assessments completed at no cost or low cost to the property owner. The owner approves of the work prior to the collection of data, so it's a collaborative process. All the data and reports are provided to the owner, which is definitely beneficial. That those reports can be very useful. The owner can use the funds to satisfy regulatory agency in the event that BEQ is involved, for example, or they could finalize a property sale or satisfy lenders. Funds can be used to address environmental concerns. And there's also, the city of Missoula has revolving loan fund cleanup funding. So if the property were perhaps in the urban fringe, for example, there's potential that the city RLF funds could be used for cleanup if necessary. Okay, that is brownfields in a nutshell. So I wanted to be sure to share my contact information, but also see if any folks have any questions or if there are any suggestions for sites that you might be aware of in your community. And I know some of you have shared sites in the past, and those are definitely on our list, but we would be happy to revisit any potential brownfield sites that you are aware of in your community. Any questions?
Yes, this, but the timeline, or is there a timeline or time constraints?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the grant is for $300,000 and it's 3 years. So we're almost a year into that 3 years. So we would have a couple of years left to use those funds and we need to spend them down. Does that answer your question, Juanita?
Thank you.
You bet.
And Sydney, this is Kevin and Lolo. 2 questions. Is there a size, like for the property, a size of the sites that you'd like us to find? That's question number 1. And then I think there's only one Wilhelm Wilsenbach on the planet. I think he's a friend of mine from high school.
Yep. I wrote myself a note to text you tomorrow. I haven't seen you for 25 years or something.
I wasn't going to do that math, but yeah. Yeah, let's get more. So.
Willie can speak more to this, but I would say no, it doesn't matter the size. I think the only caveat is if it's so big that it would actually exceed the funding that's available in order to assess it. But yeah, because the city, for example, the city of Missoula has had a lot of brownfields funding, and they have been very successful. They keep getting grants, and they received a grant, an assessment grant, and they're going to spend the entire thing on one site. So, so Willie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say there is no 2 comments on scale. There's no real rule about that. There have been tiny corner lots that were redeveloped into a Starbucks or some business that have been really key to downtowns. There's also historical buildings make good brownfield sites. They often have asbestos or maybe overblown concerns about asbestos that make the property a lot easier through use of brownfields funds. And then we've had large sites like former refinery sites or large scale sawmills. And those usually can't be addressed comprehensively and are usually broken into addressing some key area that's going to be redeveloped first. I'd also like to say that if the program is used actively, most of the programs around Montana that do have a lot of interest go on for a long time and are successful in getting additional grants thereafter and additional types of cleanup funding.
Excellent. Good answer. Thanks.
Yeah.
This is Lisa. I had a question about, has the county been looking at its own properties of various county agencies to looking at projects, and can that be used for something like housing authority homes and things like that for meth?
Yeah, it gets a little bit tricky with properties that the county owns. It has a lot to do with how long we've owned it and what kind of maybe activity occurred during the county's ownership. But I think with Missoula Housing Authority, I don't think that would fall under that category of county owned. But that's a really good question. I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, Cindy, and just to be clear, this is Dave. The Housing Authority is not under the umbrella of Missoula County, if folks
I
were
didn't
thinking
think so.
that.
Okay, thank you.
So there's not a conflict of that. Okay, good to know.
Not necessarily. In fact, one of the sites we're working on right now getting eligible is a county-owned site.
Okay.
Cindy, I wanted to bring up, because we had the discussions recently with the commissioners about reviving that discussion of the landfill, the flat property near Milltown State Park. Those who know about that area know there was a really drawn out discussion with International Paper about donating access to the Confluence Park, and it ended up partitioning off part of that property that is not part of the park, but is a flat area right near where the park is having increasing problems with vehicles and having enough space. And so Cindy and I, the commissioners, gave us the go ahead to revive that conversation. Maybe now that the park is built and there's different parties involved in this grant, maybe International Paper would be interested in renewing that conversation. But what we really need is someone who wants to speak on behalf of the parking issue. People who want to keep track of this. And so please do contact Cindy if you are involved in that parking issue with Milltown State Park and would be at all interested in helping with that renewed conversation with International Paper.
Yeah, this is Bert. I could talk to Cindy about that a little bit. I submitted that particular piece of property about 4 years ago for brownfield use. It's a little group. It's a little area between Juniper Road and the new road for the Milltown State Park. The property was donated by International Paper. There's been a level 1 study on it, but nobody is willing to pay the money for a level 2 or better. That's the reason that piece of property has been sitting forever. It would be good to use it for something, but it'd be good to use it for parking. But right now, the only thing that's being used for parking is the Milltown Park itself, and the parts of Juniper Road just before the entrance to the park that you can only walk through. We've put no parking signs on the rest of Juniper and Tamarack Road because for safety reasons primarily. But yeah, I'd be willing to talk to Cindy about that.
Thanks, Bert. That'd be great.
You want to just give me a call sometime? I'll send you my phone number.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments or suggestions?
Thanks so much, Cindy. How many projects are you? Oops, Tom Tucker, his hand is up.
Well, I have a question, but it's not related to the brownfield. I thought we were kind of done with that.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, Juanita, do you want me to quickly answer your question? Were you asking how many sites have we assessed?
Yeah, and then just to help get the word out and what community councils can do to make use of this next 2 years so we can get some work done.
Yeah, so right now we have not done any assessments. We have several properties that I would say are in the pipeline. And so, we're just continuing to cast a wide net and try to, identify more sites that we can keep moving forward on. Some of them are complicated and they may never come to fruition. And so we just want to keep moving. We also realize that there could be a snowball effect where we might get a bunch of sites and then we won't have enough funding to assess all of them. So we just want to keep it in people's in the forefront of their minds so that they know that these funds are available and there's redevelopment potential to get some of these properties assessed and maybe moving along. Did I answer all your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, we can, I did share the PowerPoint presentation with Sarah. She can distribute that to the folks, but I also have brochures and flyers that I can share as well. If you would like that, I can share them with you via email and you can distribute them to your email distribution list.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I still see Tom's hand. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, that's all right. Sorry, but I have a question about a 501c3 situation. So if anybody out there has some answers for this thing here, I'll tell you what's going on. The Frenchtown Historical Society has some money in their account. And years ago, that county was supposed to alleviate money towards that Frenchtown Historical Society, but due to unforeseen circumstances, it seems that money was allocated to the Missoula Historical Society, but there's still money in the funds. And we're down to 3 people on this board. And 2 of them are very sick. Both of them had heart problems. So they want to know what to do with this excessive amount of money that's still in the bank. Any suggestions from the community there?
I see Bert waving his.
This is Josh. I just wanted to get some clarity on this. So you're saying the Frenchtown Historical Society is in effect disbanding or ending themselves as a 501c3. Is that correct?
That's correct, because
So in your bylaws, is there any statement about what happens to assets if you disband?
I will have to get back to the president and the other two board members on that. But they asked me
that is a fairly common thing to have in the bylaws of a 501c3.
Okay.
That if you go away, you have assets where those going to go to, and so it would be worth checking, because this question your forebears may have answered this question already.
Yeah. Well, one of them was Coburn, and he passed away here about maybe 7 years ago. And he was.
One would hope the bylaws are in print somewhere.
Well, I'll have to get back to the powers to be. So, but I will check in on that. If not, then we'll have to figure out another source to donate that money to and get that off the books.
And that would be entirely up to your board. That board could make that decision as long as you have no debts.
Yeah.
Well, this is Bert. I was offering to help take care of that for him. So that's all.
Okay. Well, with that, I have no more questions, so thank you.
All right, well, that covers our agenda items. Did anyone else have any comments or questions that they wanted to ask, or requests for the next meeting? Different topics to be covered?
Hey, yeah, this is Kevin. Lee, let me finish real quick, then you can have it. Hey, at our last meeting, I wanted to apologize publicly to this group. I reprimanded Jennifer in a manner that she didn't deserve publicly in front of this body. So I wanted to apologize to her and ask for you guys to wipe that from your memory. So I apologize for that, Jennifer. All right, Lee, your turn.
Thank you.
Good move, Kevin.
Hey, I'm questioning with the East Missoula Community Council, we do not meet in the summer months in June, July, and August. However, we've been holding some Zoom meetings on specific topics. Our regular scheduled EMCC meetings start up in September and the second Tuesday of the month, which I think will be September 8th this time.
Lee, we can hardly hear you. You get closer to your speaker.
Okay, wait. Let me see if I can do something about that. Wait a second. Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me now? How about now? Am I better?
That's better.
Okay. Anyway, I would like to have our first meeting in September be a Zoom meeting, and I believe we have to be on a membership to have it over 40 minutes. I don't know how long our community council meetings are going to be, and I don't want us to be cut off in the middle of a discussion. Tell me, commissioners, what do our board need to do about getting a Zoom membership so that we can have Zoom meetings for the foreseeable future until this pandemic is not present in our lives? What is your recommendation, and what does our board need to do? Do we take a vote? I don't know how much it costs, and possibly you have other virtual programs that we would use as the county. I don't know anything. All I know is all I've learned this past summer is about Zoom, so I feel the most comfortable with it. But if you have other options that I should know about, I'm open ears. What can we do? And I'd like to get this under control before our next meeting.
Just so everyone knows, Kevin hosted a sort of hybrid meeting here in Lolo last month. It actually went pretty well. There was some initial logging in issues, but we used Google, and it allowed us to go for about an hour, I think is about how long we went. and I don't think there's any time limit with their service. So, you know, but I don't know how the commissioners want to handle it.
And that's
Well,
a
this is-
Google meeting?
Kevin
That's a
can
Google-
explain. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let me explain that real quick. We had, there were several folks that wanted to have an in-person meeting, so we followed the guidelines that were set forth through the health department. The community center that we used went through complete sanitization of the facility, doorknobs, light switches, chairs, anything that people would come into contact with. And so it was safe. It followed all the guidelines that the health department set forth for a group meeting. I've been in line with more people at Costco than actually came to our meeting. There was 12 people in person, and there was one issue up front at the beginning of the meeting. I did read a statement that said if you have to wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, then you need to leave, or we'll close the meeting. So we did boot one person from the meeting, threw her out. She wasn't going to comply, so we just let her leave. And then Devin and Jennifer were able to tune in and be part of the meeting via technology. I think it went flawless. It was great. So I like that going forward. It was kind of a test run, and I felt like we were able to maintain safe protocols and conduct the meeting that Lolo needed to get done. So.
Okay. My comment to that is that we have our meetings at the East Missoula Community Center, which is at our fire hall. And right now, as far as I know, our fire chief does not permit meetings larger than 10 people. And since there's 5 of us on the committee, of course, we would expect a lot more than that for public participation. So I'm not wanting to shut people out. That's why I want to go on virtually as a Zoom meeting. And I would rather avoid the conflict of people not wanting to wear the mask, because I will not hold a meeting without everybody having a mask on, period.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it worked well for us. And luckily we have a large facility that they hold bingo there on Sundays currently, and there's over 50 people in attendance there. So if we couldn't do it safely, we wouldn't have done it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and we're unable to at this time.
Yeah, this is Bert. Let me say that we have had Zoom meetings, and like you're talking about, it's been 40 minutes and then they'll cut you off. But one of the good things is it requires us to do a 40-minute meeting. The other thing is, and Lee, this works for you too, is that you've got money in your account. And,
right.
And if I'm not mistaken, it is within the purview of the councils to spend that money for operations, which would mean a Zoom license if we wanted to. And Zoom, I think, goes month by month if you want it.
Right.
Okay.
I think
I've given some consideration to that, but I have not done it yet.
Okay. Well, that's what my plan is, and I believe it's really reasonable per month. It's, probably like $12 a month, just off the top of my head. I don't know for sure, but that's what I would like to do. So what are my instructions? Is that something I put before a vote before the meeting, or do we vote on it at this coming meeting and hold our first meeting to 40 minutes? Any suggestions, anybody?
Personally, I would just do it.
Okay.
Do it and turn in your recorded minutes to the county.
Okay.
I'm looking at Sarah. Yeah.
And Lee, I just looked it up. A business one is $19.99 or $19.95 a month.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can go to a pro, and I don't know what pro is. I don't know if we would qualify, but that's $14.95 a month.
Okay, I'll look into that then.
I don't know what they would cost a nonprofit. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think we need pro.
I don't know where we fall in, but business is $19.99, and so is an enterprise, $19.99.
Okay, I'll look that up, but I just forewarning you, that's what I'd like to do. So
I
So Lee, Chris,
Leah,
Lee,
thanks,
it's Chris
since
from
it's
Missoula County. The
meant
one
for
thing,
your
the one thing I would caution is if you're picking a platform other than what the county uses, which is Microsoft Teams, if you need support, it won't really be something that the county IT folks will be able to help you with because the county doesn't support Zoom. So just be aware of that wouldn't be a resource that'll be available for you if you choose to go onto a different platform.
Yeah, this is Bert. Microsoft Teams is not the best thing out there.
And
Well, Bert, I certainly would never want to question your opinion, but the county's been able to conduct all of its meetings on it pretty successfully. So,
Sarah,
I've had trouble with it every time I get on.
I don't have Microsoft. I'm on Linux. So I'm going to lean probably towards Zoom, and I'll take care of the...
It'll run on Linux.
Do what?
It'll run on Linux.
It is on Linux?
Microsoft Team will run on Linux.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hey, Lee, this is Chet. Oh, sorry, Sarah, you've been cut off a couple of times. I was just going to say, if there's something we can do to help you figure that out, feel free to give us a shout. I'm sure Sarah would offer the same. And I think that if you do decide to go the Zoom route, that's certainly not an issue if that's something that the community council would prefer. If you'd like to put it to a vote amongst your council, probably all the better. Just adds another layer of approval from folks, but it certainly seems like a reasonable route to go. That said, Chris's point I think is also valid. If we can help support you with Teams, we'd be happy to visit with you about that as well.
Chet, I got a question for Chet. And maybe for the commissioners, our bylaws have been in limbo for quite some time now, and part of it is due to thinking through how to put virtual meetings into the bylaws. Is anything happening on that? And if so, when would we get it?
Yeah, thanks, Bert. I would punt that one over to Sarah. I think she's been working more closely on that, and also maybe loop her in back to what she was trying to chime in earlier in case we missed something, Sarah.
Thanks, Chet. Lee, I was just going to suggest that since it's a purchase for your council, to just set up a test run for the 40-minute first time, make the vote, and make sure your council agrees to move forward with that purchase. And then if they agree, then move forward with Zoom, or reach out to the county for Microsoft Teams support. So that's all I was going to say about that. And then as far as the bylaw question, Bert, it is, we have a small group of us who are working on trying to recreate the bylaw template to incorporate some of the changes that have come up with COVID. So we're just trying to get some consistency across bylaws and just how we want to move forward with those. So yes, it's in the works, it's in the process. I don't have a final date as to when they will be approved, but we are trying our best to make them as efficient and beneficial to all the councils across the board.
Will the councils get a chance to look at the draft of that before it's made final?
We can make that available to you.
I think it'd be a good idea.
Yep.
I agree with that. Thank you, Bert, for bringing that up.
It looks
Thanks,
like
Sarah.
Tucker and Tom Broder have their hands up.
And that
Yeah,
went along.
Juanita, this is, and for Sarah, this is really for next meeting. I saw something today that there are some yet more grants for small businesses. And it's been really good up here in Sealy and Swan Valley to have a lot of these grants for nonprofits, like our visitor center and museum. So maybe our next meeting, we could have a section where somebody just talks about all of these programs that are available now and how to get there, as opposed, because it's been really helpful, but a lot of it, I think, what was it, a few weeks ago, it turns out the rental assistance program in the state is very underutilized, not sure why. Anyway, that would be my suggestion for next week's program.
Great, thanks.
For the next meeting, I definitely would love to have another county health update since the schools would have been opened. for a month. And I think that's going to cause a lot of changes. So I'd love to have another update from Cindy.
Thank you, Lisa. I agree.
Yeah, this is Tucker, and I'm clear. We're done.
Okay.
This is Bert. My supper's ready. It's been a pleasure, as always. Thanks a lot. And thanks for the commissioners for showing up to this.
Thank you, everyone.
Said to me.
Yeah, great meeting. These are real helpful.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
And I'll talk to you
Thanks,
later.
Sarah,
Lee.
for making
Night,
this
Lee.
happen.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, so.
Good night.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Everyone.